Public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Housing Authority. May we have a roll call for the City Council, please?
Council members Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Quintero.
Here.
And may we have roll for the Housing Authority?
Authority members Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Incy.
Here.
Razian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chairman Najarian.
Here.
May we have your report?
Agenda for the March 23, 2010 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council and the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, March 18, 2010 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Before you today is Director of Community Redevelopment and Housing regarding development of a 36-unit affordable multifamily rental housing project proposed by Central City Lights LP to be located at 327 to 331 West Salem Street and City Parking Lot Number 12. 1A is authority motion authorizing execution of a letter of loan commitment between the Glendale Housing Authority and Central City Lights, a California limited partnership. 1B is an authority resolution authorizing land acquisition loan agreement between the Glendale Housing Authority and Central City Lights, a California limited partnership. At C is authority motion authorizing a cooperation agreement between the City Council and the Housing Authority pertaining to city transfer of City Parking Lot Number 12 to the Housing Authority. At D is council motion authorizing a cooperation agreement between the City Council and the Housing Authority pertaining to the city's transfer of City Parking Lot Number 12 to the Housing Authority. At E is authority motion authorizing execution of a lease option for Parking Lot Number 12 between the Housing Authority and Central City Lights, a California limited partnership. At F is authority motion authorizing amendment to the 2009-2010 Home Action Plan by implementing transfer of home funds to allocate funds for the project. At G is authority resolution appropriating $6,298,200 to provide funds for the project.
Okay, what we will not be doing today is making a decision. The design will basically be reserving consideration of the design to a later date. Mr. Starbird.
Yes, I go to Phil Lanzafame, Director of Community Development and Housing. Phil.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council and Redevelopment Agency, the project before you is a 36-unit affordable housing project which will be made available to families of lower income, those households. They are 2, 3, and 4-bedroom units. Included in that 36 is 4 artist flats, which will provide living space as well as studio or gallery space for artists, and then 58 parking spaces. That is reduced from the code requirement through 2 avenues, both the utilization of what we call SB 1818 for legislation for affordable housing, and then also a parking exception or parking reduction that was granted by zoning hearing officers. The property is located at 327, 331 Salem, which is a privately owned lot, and city lot, parking lot number 12. The developer is in escrow to purchase the private lot for $1,054,000. And as part of this structure, it would transfer to the authority upon execution of a DDA, and then subsequently released out. The total project costs are $15.57 million. The developer is using a combination of tax credit equity, mortgage financing. They're deferring some of their fee, as well as authority assistance to make up the project costs and funding. The requested assistance of the Housing Authority is $6.895 million, approximately $5.9 million in cash, and $1 million in land, which would be the city parking lot that would be contributed to this project. Included in that total is approximately $513,000 of parks and library impact fees that would be paid upon certificate of occupancy. As I said, the developer is using tax credits. They have requested assistance and would like to compete in the March 25th tax funding cycle. The project has received all of its entitlements, including environmental review. Planning Commission, they granted a standards variance to allow those artist flats in a residential area. The zoning hearing officer, I mentioned, granted the parking reduction, There were concerns expressed over parking from the neighborhood. You heard from one of the property owners today. We've looked and looked at informal studies on Lot 12 and have found that that is underutilized. In fact, it is the least used parking lot in our downtown area. On-site parking demand, the 58 spaces, we looked at a parking demand study based on some of our own projects and similar projects that the developer operates, and found that there was sufficient parking for the on-site residents. The city clerk gave you a whole list of approvals that I'd like to just touch on each one of those, tell you how it works, and put it in context of the agreement. The letter of loan commitment commits the total assistance of $6.895 million, and it preserves that for 3 funding cycles, this March, June, and then again next March, if the developer is not successful in the first. There is a loan acquisition agreement of $1,064,000. This would be a loan from the authority to the developer. It would be part of that total assistance, so that they could close escrow on the private property that they wish to contribute to this project. That escrow needs to close in April. We won't know whether they're successful in the tax credits until June. So that loan would be out there. It provides resources for them to close escrow. If the project does not happen, the loan is due and payable. If there's a default on that, the Housing Authority can take back the property, either resell it or put it to another project on that site. There are cooperation agreements between the Housing Authority and the City Council. This would be for the sale of the parking lot property from the city to the Housing Authority. We would pay the city for that land. We assume that the values, they're identical properties to the private site, so we assume the land is the same amount, $1,054,000. We have enough cash to put in for assistance on this project, and then put about half of that amount would be owed to the city in an escrow account. The balance would be paid as soon as possible on our next funding distribution to the Housing Authority, or in any event, no later than within 5 years. That would be in the cooperation agreement. There is a lease option. This gives the developer the option to lease our site as for this project, and really the intent and purpose of that is to demonstrate site control as they go for the tax credit award. That would expire in July of 2011. That would accommodate all the 3 funding cycles if they needed to go through all 3 of those. You need to amend the home action plan. This is to identify this project using home funds in our action plan. Finally, a Housing Authority appropriation of $6.3 million to fund this project now. Again, the balance would come with the next distribution. With that, I will tell you that concludes our presentation. The developer is here, staff is here from all the departments that have worked on this project. If you have any questions.
Okay, Ms. Friedman?
I have a couple questions. When we talk about affordable housing, there's often concerns from the neighborhood about who's going to be living in those units. And I would appreciate if, for the benefit of the public and for the neighborhood, you talk a little bit about what this affordable housing means, the type of incomes that are required to live there, and what those people will be paying for those units.
Yes, Housing Authority member Friedman, Peter Zovak, Deputy Director of Housing. On page 5 of the staff report, there's a breakdown of what the lower income limits are. As an example, a family of 4, the most a household will be able to earn would be approximately $47,500 a year annually. There are some 50% units slated for 50% and below area medium income households. Those income limits are about $40,000, and some of the units may serve households at approximately $24,000 annually. be able to qualify for these units, it's not simply meeting the income criteria as well. There are certain standards that the developer has set up, and these have been standards that have been continuous in all the previous projects. There's a certain income minimum that they have to earn to be able to make the affordable monthly rent payment. There are issues with regards to credit ratings that they have to have complete and done and satisfactory to the developer's criteria. So, for instance, previous evictions would be counted against them, poor credit score ratings, references from previous landlords, things like that. Those are all the elements that the developer looks at when considering an applicant. It's simply not, obviously the income limits are the most important with regards to all the different funding sources, but the developer then drills down to a level that a normal landlord would be looking at as well with regards to creditworthiness, performance in previous living environments and things like that.
So are these primarily retired people, employed people, unemployed people? Are they, one of our speakers had a concern about them being close to a bar. Are these people that are getting drunk and staying in flop houses? You know, what is the population that we see in this type of housing?
In these types of projects, tax credit rental projects, you have working families.
These are working class people,
Yes.
working families.
Yes.
Okay.
And in the previous projects we have set up, we've not had problems that the speaker had mentioned in any of those.
Okay, thank you. I have a question, one last question for Mr. Lanzafame. Can you just briefly touch on what our responsibilities are as an agency and as the Housing Authority in terms of building affordable housing? Is this something that's completely discretionary from the city? Is it something that we're obligated to do? And, you know, kind of where are we with that?
Let me start with perhaps your obligation. With all of the tax increment that our two project areas generate, we set aside 20% of that to fund affordable housing. It's mandatory that you spend that. If you don't spend it within a certain period of time, it goes back and is redistributed to other communities that would use it. We frequently use those dollars and leverage them with other federal funds, home funds, and our last project you saw Begin funds, and those are different programs for affordable housing. I think as an economic development professional, what we're always striving for is to create a complete community, an entire community. I think people of all income ranges deserve and should have housing that they can live in, that is quality housing within our community. And so from a, not so much a legal perspective, but I think your policy has been that we're going to provide this housing because it's the right thing to do, and we want to have a complete community that all income levels can live in. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. Thank
Are there
you.
any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Start with Charlie Hooker, followed by Rodney Kahn.
Yes. I have several concerns about this project. This is an area where I lived and grew up in, and my parents were there for 45 years. And I am very displeased with, what they have proposed. What about the parking for the Glendale Central Theater, Clancy's, the Galleria, the band theaters? And we've already discussed, the Lara has about the crime for that area. Would there be more? Or is it doesn't really look like it's a good thing to have this. And the parking is going to be unbelievable, because throughout Glendale, most of these places were built to have two-car garages, but now with the kids that they have and everything too, there's usually 4 cars now to a family, and all of the streets in Glendale, supposedly, at least they should have 2-hour parking so that they can get the streets cleaned and everything. But if you have all of this new development with all of the cars and everything, and trying to find them on their street cleaning day, trash day, that's going to be a horrendous thing, because I know I live up in the woodlands, and trying to get our streets cleaned and trying to get the trash and everything, it's a real bad deal. And I think having this built would really be a real eyesore for Glendale and a real bad thing for the people that live in that area. Because most of the people that live there now are retired, or they've been on a fixed income and they can't pick up and move. And Glendale can't have a black eye, with this thing. Why don't they, these developers and everything, I'm sure that they have an area where they live and everything. Why won't they build it in their own particular areas? Most of them come from Newport Beach and Redondo Beach, or the communities other than Glendale. And why don't they want to build it in their own particular area instead of sticking it another big eyesore in Glendale? And the homeowners around there are, like I said, are just going to be scratching their head to try find parking places. And there's less schools now than that they had in the 1960s and the 80s. There's I think there's 3 less elementary schools that they used to have because there was a recession. I mean, they didn't have children, and they tore down some of the schools.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hooker.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rodney Kahn, followed by Larry Tyson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, authority members, and city staff. My name is Rodney Kahn. I'm actually a resident of the city of Glendale. There's been a few speakers in terms of the site location. We've always thought this is an excellent site location. The reason being, we're in very close proximity, walking distance, to restaurants, to retail shops, recreational amenities. We're also very close by to public transportation. Along Central, we have both the MTA and B-Line, also on Broadway as well. This project includes something a little bit different, the 4 artist lofts, which we thought were kind of neat. We're right outside of the downtown specific plan area that has an arts district. So it certainly makes sense to have a few of the units being for artists with that proximity. This is a transitional area. The first speaker that spoke under the oral communication said they own the one building. On Salem, where we're located at, east of us is a parking lot, and east of that is a 6-story office building. To the west of us on Salem is a 2-story residential, and we're at 4 stories that step down to 3. So in terms of the use or the mix of uses, we are very complementary. This is our 4th public hearing. We had a public hearing that was already mentioned for our density bonus ordinance, parking concessions, and waivers. There was much discussion at that hearing about parking. There was a parking study that was done. It was discussed. It was debated. The decision was rendered. It was approved, and there was no appeal filed. We went to the Planning Commission. Mr. Lanzafane mentioned it was a standards variance. It was actually a use variance. That was approved as well, and we went to the Design Review Board. That was approved as well. This is our 5th affordable housing project with ADI, affordable family housing project that we've done collectively with the city. And over the course of the last few projects, we actually learned a few things. One of the things we learned was we were building projects that had excess parking, and it made a lot of sense to take that money that was being used for parking that's sitting vacant and actually build more affordable housing units. So that's what we proposed. The reason we're here today, obviously, is for the funding to make sure the City of Glendale has support. We think this project, as it relates to tax credits, will score very high. The off-site amenities that I spoke about within walking distance, along with public transportation, along with our on-site amenities, which include a community room, a tot lot, things like that. And, important to point out, this is a green building, sustainable building standards, which will also help with our scoring. I'll conclude my remarks. We have our whole project team. If you have questions, we're happy to answer that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Larry Tyson, followed by Ajit Mithawala.
Good afternoon. I'm Larry Tyson, the landscape architect on the project. And since we're not addressing design today, I don't want to address design. I would like to say a couple of short comments. I have worked with ADI for over the last 28 years. They're a quality operation. This is the fifth one, as Rodney said, they've done in Glendale. And I think they fill a need in the low-income housing in our city in a very quality-minded way. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ajit Mithawala, followed by Harsh Mehta.
Well, thank you very much for allowing us to come and present our project and hopefully get approval. We believe that we are part of Glendale. We have been providing affordable housing, and every project that we have been doing, we are learning from city, we are learning from your staff, we are learning from our tenants, and we keep improving and improving our project. And we are very thankful to you to come and let us do some project. We are very thankful to you to give us opportunity. And I want to thank you that we are going to give you another wonderful Artist Loft for Artist Loft project, which is a new design and new environment that we are opening up in the city. And again, this project is going to be another one more big step forward for us. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you. And if you have any questions about the project, I'll be very happy to answer. I can tell you one thing. The project looks, in design and everything, we have a team here, I'll tell you, very, very good. But this project, with your support, looks very favorable of reading tax credit funding, which is the most important thing. And when we do affordable housing, typically up to two-thirds money comes from tax credits. In other words, we will have some investor buying tax credit. And that is very, very important for doing a high-quality project. And City of Glendale demands that, and I assure you, I promise you that we will exceed every standards that we have put forward to produce this project. Thank you very much, and I'll take your questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mehta, followed by Hovik Ajanian.
I don't have to say anything, but I'm available for anything.
Okay, thank you. Hovik Ajanian.
That's Hovik Agayan, Mayor.
Agayan.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, Housing Authority members and staff. My name is Hovik Agayan, 1415 East Colorado, Suite 100, Glendale. I'm an architect, contractor, and real estate developer and investor. I do not oppose the development of affordable housing project in the community. Actually, I support affordable housing, and that is not the reason I'm here today. On March 17, we filed an appeal for 327, 331 West Salem Street, City Hall Parking, lot number 12, a 36 units affordable housing project. The reason for the appeal is multiple violations of the Glendale Municipal Code. DRB approved the project on March 4, 2010, even though the applicant and staff misrepresented the DRB that the project met the GMC additional open space requirement when it did not. I certified before the DRB at the March 4 hearing that the applicant incorrectly calculated the additional open space requirement for the project in violation of the GMC by using the lot depth dimension instead of a street width dimension. The additional open space requirement was not 1,900 square feet as shown on the applicant plans presented to DRB, but 3,100 square feet. At the DRB hearing, city staff wrongfully rejected our objections and incorrectly told the DRB that the project additional open space requirement was 1,900 square feet. DRB was misled and the project, and unfortunately accepted the incorrect staff analysis and approved the project with some corrections. Then on March 8, 2010, we received an email from Mr. Eric Kraus, senior planner, acknowledging the staff now calculated the additional open space requirement as 3,100 square feet. Just as we said, I must commend the staff for accepting their mistake. On March 10, 2010, we received another email from Mr. Kraus stating that the applicant was revising the plans to meet the additional open space requirement, revising the plans to add 1,200 square feet on open space on the first floor. So the plans can include the correct additional open space requirement of 3,100 square feet. Is a substantial change from what was represented to DRB. It is 63% increase in open space, and that must affect other project design issues. The DRB should review. DRB was given wrong information by the applicant and staff on a key element of the project that has a major impact on the project design. It is premature for Council and Housing Authority to approve financial aspects of the project, knowing that the project has to undergo substantial revisions, which may include loss of units or additional height in order to meet additional open space requirement and receive DRB approval. We respectfully request that the Council and Housing Authority defer any action until the project has been revised and gone back to DRB for their review. Thank you for your time, and I will answer to your question if you have any.
Any questions? No. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. I don't have any other cards. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Okay. Well, I'll start the questions for the staff. The last speaker, Mr. Garcia, mentions multiple violations of the code and says it's premature. What is your feeling? Or perhaps Mr. Howard, whoever.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, because this project was appealed, as the speaker indicated, to the council. That hearing is scheduled to take place on April 13th. For that reason, the council cannot pre-commit its discretion on that appeal. However, as I stated earlier, I think it's appropriate if you have questions for clarification purposes, that would be we believe that would be acceptable legally. Again, as long as the council gives no indication of its decision or how it's leaning on the design review appeal that would be coming before you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, how about the assertion that there are multiple violations of the code?
Well, I'd have to have someone from the staff sort of address. Just I couldn't answer that specifically.
Okay. Mr. Khan, do you have a rebuttal?
If I can add something. As it relates to multiple violations of the code, that doesn't exist. That's just a comment that's been thrown out there. I don't want to get into anything as it relates to the design. I guess we're not supposed to. But in terms of the open space, there were minor adjustments made to comply with the open space, both additional open space, we exceed the common open space, and we exceed the private open space. So to lay their claim or to cast confusion is totally misleading.
Okay, let's hear from the staff if that's your feeling.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Eric Krause, Senior Planner with the Planning Department. The multiple violations that they were referring to, one was the common or the additional open space. This is, and then the other one was basically the fact that in order for the developer to gain that open space, the 3,100 square feet, they'd be violating the code in terms of the design for design review, and that there would be substantial changes that would require them to come back to design review. So those are the two multiple violations that I believe they were referring to.
And what is your feeling on that assertion?
Well, I don't want to.
I think it's acceptable just to answer the question. I mean, the question is, will it require redesign such as that they might lose units or require significant costs? And I think we can answer that question without getting into the merits of the design review case itself.
Yeah, staff feels that there would not have to be substantial changes to the project that would require it to go back to DRB.
All right. That's all the questions I have at this point. Is there anyone else that has any questions? Ms. Friedman?
I have two questions. So is it staff's recommendation that we go ahead and decide on the case that's before us, that the appeal can proceed as planned without us having to wait to make this decision until then? Is that the staff recommendation?
Yes, the items before you we're recommending your approval on is both the City Council and the Redevelopment Agency. The appeal will come to you in 2 weeks.
Housing.
Sorry.
And my second question is completely unrelated to that issue, and I think it's for Peter, which is, when we're adding density like this with affordable housing projects, traditionally with the other projects, as an example, where are those people coming from? Are they people primarily that are coming from outside of the city or within the city? Is it a mix?
Predominantly, they're coming from within Glendale, is what our survey results are showing. In the last few projects of this size that ADI has developed, we had approximately 5,000 to 6,000 households apply. And when we put them on our spreadsheets and start to look at them, a majority of them are really Glendale residents. And thus, through the lottery process, a majority of the people who are selected through the lottery are Glendale residents.
So are these Glendale residents that are living in less than adequate situations, maybe older housing stock or overcrowded housing stock?
Correct. Some have indicated that they're living in substandard housing now. Others have indicated that they're doubling up with family members so that the housing is somewhat affordable for them. Others are living in housing that's not affordable for them at all, and they're struggling.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
And you got Mr. Najarian.
Just to follow up on that, Peter, because I got this question all the time from applicants for affordable housing. My friend in Hollywood applied and got into an affordable housing, and I've been living in Glendale for 20 years trying to get it. I can't get it. In fact, we can't discriminate based on their residence. Is that correct?
The projects are open to everyone. It's not a Glendale residency-only requirement. We are prohibited from doing that.
And that's because of the federal funds and
correct.
And
all the funding sources.
All the funding sources.
Any other comments? Mr. Draymond.
Well, a couple of things. Why do we keep calling these artist lofts?
Flats. I heard one correction.
Mr. Draymond is correct. The artist flat.
Let's see. Who is here from the staff that could talk about parking as if I didn't know? And you have the farthest to walk. Okay. Thank you. We've been hearing a few comments about parking, so let me run some of those questions by you. First of all, Mr. Lansfame was saying this is the most underutilized of our city municipal lots. Is that correct?
Yes, Tom Mitchell, Traffic and Transportation Division.
Thank you.
Yes, we have 10 lots, metered lots in the downtown, and in a survey, the last one we compiled for fiscal year 2007-2008, it was the least utilized. Its generation during a comparison of the revenue that was actually generated versus the potential revenue generation came to 16%. The average in the downtown is around 55%. Lot 6 behind Porto's, the highest was at 90%. It's 34 parking spaces, 33 of which are metered, represent about 5% of the spaces in the metered lots downtown, and it generates about 1.5% of the revenue. So from a cash flow standpoint, it's definitely in an underutilized fashion. From an actual occupancy, surveys that staff has done, and that's been from community redevelopment staff, our staff, the police department, basically it is, if you, during the normal business day, out of the 34 spaces, it averages 4 or 5 cars that are parked in there at that time.
Excuse me, at what time?
Any time between roughly 8 a.m. in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. After 6 o'clock up till about 10 p.m., it can vary, but that's when by far the maximum use of that lot is. It can vary from 40 to 75%. It's predominantly from patrons and employees of Clancy's who choose not to take advantage of the complimentary valet. There's plenty of space in the valet system for Clancy's on the south side of the street, but whether they just choose not to do tipping or fearful of how a valet parks their vehicle, they choose to park in the in lot 12. but there's ample parking in Clancy's off-street facilities to the south. There's even a lot that is immediately between the alley and this project, Lot 12, that after 5:30, it's totally free parking, self-park, and people take advantage of that as well. Our conclusion has been on this that, and then what I should say is, after 10 o'clock at night until 6 in the morning, you'll get one or two people that park in there. So the residents, and I can empathize with them, feel there isn't enough on-street parking for them, but for whatever reason, they do not choose to use Lot 12 to park overnight. So it's, in that regard, it's there, but this is not one of the occasions where build it and they will come. It just hasn't happened, and it's been that way traditionally for any number of years.
All right. Next question is, Mann Theaters, Center Theater, Galleria, Clancy's, those folks using this lot?
I would say that in the majority of the time, Clancy's, as I just described, there may be patrons that choose to do that. Again, have the opportunity to park rather than for tipping on the south side. We have not seen that. I'm not saying it doesn't occur. There may be peak times during the year at the Galleria, maybe in the old days when the economy was stronger, that there may be people that would park in there, but it's truly the exception. Our surveys, however limited, have not shown that really occurs. Again, I don't deny, I'm not saying that the man is incorrect, but it's not something that happens on a normal basis by any means.
Okay. You had the ownership of Clancy's at the Sear City offices on this one?
We haven't heard anything from them, and usually no news is good news or meeting no objection.
All right. Thank you on that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
May I ask one question while he's up?
Absolutely.
So he doesn't have to walk the way back and forth. How many guest parking spaces are in this development?
Under the PROS project?
Yes.
I believe it's nine guest spaces, and...
Correct, that's 9.
Right, 9.
Thank you.
Mr. Major, I'm not sure if you're the correct person to ask, but is this project fully parked?
Yes, well, by code requires 81 parking spaces. That's inclusive of guest parking. The shared parking study that was done recommended a minimum of 57. They're proposing 58. Staff has reviewed that, feels it was done in a fair, comprehensive manner, and that this instance is what's been shown, that our code parking really requires more parking than necessary for affordable housing. And the fact that it's, regardless where it would be located, but then the fact that it's very near the downtown and the benefits that can come from a lower parking or from a parking reduction from there, we're comfortable with the parking supply. So that people have been worried that not enough parking would be provided. Well, we think there is going to be enough parking provided on site. And then with the loss of Lot 12, there really isn't much demand there, so that there really should not be a significant problem if this were to proceed.
Thank you.
More. Salem Street, is that preferential parking?
It is preferential parking.
Parking only on one side of the street?
Right. Parking's only on the north side. The only time you park on the south side is for the 2 hours on Thursday when street sweeping occurs.
And it must have got preferential parking because the neighborhood complained there was not enough
Right.
parking?
It's 2-hour parking. It's been 2-hour parking limitation for quite some time, between 9 and 6 a.m. Residents that do have preferential parking are not subject to that 2-hour time limit, or everyone else is.
So people apparently that have worked in other places have been parking in the residential area that would, on Salem, that would cause them to come and ask for preferential parking.
Right. If they're a resident there, then obviously they can receive the preferential parking. If not, then they do that. And it's just for that first block from Central down to Columbus.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have a question for Peter Zovac. Mr. Zovac, we've learned from questions asked by my colleagues, Ms. Friedman and Mr. Najarian. Ms. Friedman asking about where the majority of residents that live in our city's affordable housing buildings, are they primarily locals or are they primarily coming from elsewhere? And from Mr. Najarian, we learned that we can't limit it to just Glendale residents. But have we actually looked to see where they are coming from? And you seem to indicate to Ms. Friedman that they're primarily Glendale residents.
Correct. Through the lottery process, we've been able to look at spreadsheets and identify.
Is it marginally so, overwhelmingly so?
No, it's a large number, as a matter of fact. It's a number when, in speaking with other housing staff in other agencies. Traditionally, the trend is that people outside their agencies are getting a majority of the units. Here in Glendale, it's actually different. It's just the reverse. A majority of the Glendale residents are being able to be lucky enough to be selected for the units here. And it's a combination of things. Information is distributed very well here. There's a large network of social service agencies that we connect with when we're doing lottery announcements and things like that. We try and make it as convenient as possible to be able to get applications. So the process is, we would like to say, is comprehensive enough that we give as much opportunities and information to Glendale residents, and I think that shows. And there's a genuine interest in the residents here as opposed to maybe in other agencies. But we do advertise. I didn't want to leave the impression that we don't let other cities know. We do advertise in regional newspapers. We're required to do fair marketing, and as a result, we're doing regional papers.
All right, Peter, in the other affordable projects that either ADI has built or others have built in the city, what are we seeing in terms of the parking there? There's been several references to being overparked, or that the city is on a learning curve related to this kind of thing. Are we finding a lot of spillover parking in the neighborhoods surrounding this?
No, we haven't heard that. And I think some of that is because some of the earlier projects were parked per code. So, for instance, the Harvard-Jackson Senior Project and the Silvercrest Salvation Army Senior Project. If you talk to them, they might tell you they have a level or sea of concrete parking that is just not being utilized for their clientele, and those were built per code. In the last few years, we've been able to, and especially with the approval of SB 1818, which provided some relaxation on parking, we've been able to slowly get to a number that we think is a number that our projects would generate in terms of parking demand. For instance, the Habitat for Humanity projects, they seem to understand exactly what type of vehicle count their families will need and incorporate into their proposals, and we tend to see that in those projects. In the senior family project or senior housing projects, they don't need to meet those projects that have met full parking requirements really did not need it, and so we're starting to see this adjust.
All right, just a couple more questions. I'm sorry. And I'm not sure if you're the one that can answer it or if I have to turn to Mr. Kahn. But with the given mix of units in terms of bedrooms, number of bedrooms, what do have there been any projections made? What do we anticipate in the number of school-age children overall in that 36 units?
I would say that not every, for sure, it's not that every household or every unit has school-age children. We do have some households that are made up of adults, and those could be adults that include the grandparents as well as the children. I'd say about 50% of the units that we've developed so far have young children that are attending school age.
Okay. So with 36 units, do we have any estimate of how many children we think will be living in this?
I think to be safe to at least assume that half to maybe 70% of those units might have household members who are school-age children.
Let me turn to representatives of the... Thank you, Peter. Mr. Kahn, same question. Any idea of how many...
Agency Member Draymond, I was talking to one of our team members as you were speaking. The market study revealed that about 50% of the units would have school-age children. So if we looked at it, and there's I don't know if it's 1.2 or 1.3 if they factor that in, so you multiply that by about 18, and that'll give you an idea about how many kids we would think would be living there.
Okay. All right. Let me just mention that one of the problems with the Glendale School District is facing is not, it's to do with declining student enrollment, not growing student enrollment. That's one of the problems. But there was a reference made to the district closing schools, and it's always kind of interesting to me when I hear that. I just wanted to mention this as my last comment. The 3 schools that I know of that were closed in the district, there may be others, but he mentioned 3. 2 of them were in the Crescenta Valley. They were both primary is Lowell Elementary School, which is now a private school, Montrose Elementary School, which is now a private school, and Clark Junior High School, which was a middle school, which is now Clark Magnet School. So I'm not seeing a nexus between this particular project at Salem near Central and three public schools, closure of three public schools in the Crescenta Valley area. I guess if I had to ask one last question, you're probably ready to club me, get me to stop. This is kind of fascinating. Keep the gavel nearby, just because I was debating whether to ask it, but I'm going to ask it. Mr. Agayan, if you wouldn't mind, I have a question for you. I thank you for your letter, and I appreciate you taking the time to read it to us as well. Your opening sentence is, I do not oppose the development of affordable housing projects in the community. Actually, I support affordable housing, and that is the reason I am here. And your letter goes on to cite the issue, your contentions related to the municipal code as it relates to calculation of open space. So are you telling me that you are opposing this simply because...
I'm opposing to the project as is.
Right. Simply because of the calculation of open space. That is your sole contention. That's why you oppose this project.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments from staff? Mr. Weaver?
Well, I've always supported affordable housing in this city for 13 years. And I've worked with ADI, all their other projects. They do quality construction. And I've liked what they've done. But having said that, this time today I'm going to abstain because there is a design review appeal. I don't know what's going to come out of that. So I'm not commenting anything on that at this time. But as the last speaker just said, it could have impact, not just on that and something else. I was and still am concerned about the parking. I'm one of those cheapy cheaps that when I go to Clancy's, I park in the lot so I don't have to tip the valet parker. Because the valet is free, and then, come on, when he gets your car, you pay him a few dollars. So we park over in that lot. I guess others do too. And I understand it's very underutilized. If I go there at lunch, if I see 2 or 3 cars in there, I'm lucky. It's not the point. It's part of the area has been designated for parties and stuff. Guests are coming. There's 9 spaces. But the neighborhood is already just scrunched with no parking available for the residents that are there now. And I just have my gut instincts that it'll have impacts. I'm not comfortable yet. I mean, since yesterday I've been acquiring the transportation or the parking study, the neg declaration study, the design review studies that I had never received before, and I'm still trying to digest it all. I'm concerned about the neg deck on site. 2 mature oak trees are being torn down, and one it's right on the west property line. It can't be saved. That concerns me. Those oak trees, some of them are 50, 100 years old. I know I fought for the oak tree that's in the center quad at Pacific Edison. They were going to tear that down too. And the architect designed around it. We kept it. It's a big shady area at the school. So seeing 2 mature oaks go, and both of them appear to be almost right on the property lines, I'm wondering what consideration was taken in the design for those oaks. The one right now provides an enormous amount of shade on that lot and to the property to the west. So, and I'm still uncomfortable to say I'm going to vote for the financing package before I know final say on the design, and I'm able to ask questions about why it can't be designed to save the oak trees, or are you sure you have enough parking for up and down the street? Because I went down, I counted every house on that block. But that starts to get into compatibility issues, and I won't talk about that until it comes here for design review appeal. So, again, I say, I like affordable housing. It's great for the city. We need more of it. And ADI does a great job. That, for now, I will abstain. I'm not going to vote no. I'm just abstaining at this point in time.
Okay, are there any other?
If there are no more observation, I'd like to make a motion.
Close public hearing.
I'll close the public hearing. Let me, well, go ahead and make your motion. Actually, we have a number of motions. One of them is a council motion. The others are all authority.
For the authority, it would be 1A, B, C, E, F, and G. One remaining being the council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and then go ahead and make the motion for the council.
He can't, but I will.
That's right.
I'll move 1D for council.
Second.
Okay. And in terms of comments, let me just, there's lots of things to talk about, but the bottom line is, in terms of Salem, there are 3 very large multifamily projects that are there on that street. So it's not a single-family neighborhood that we are invading with a large multifamily project, and it does abut a 6-story plus commercial unit, as well as a very popular commercial building, as well as a very popular restaurant with lots of activities throughout the day and evening and on weekends. So that alone, I think some of the concerns that have been raised, you have to look at this site and the surroundings. Mr. Friedman, Ms. Friedman, and then Mr. Weaver.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment. I understand that there's a lot of concern in the community about adding density and adding housing units, and I share that concern. So I completely understand that. But I think when it comes to affordable housing, what we're usually doing is not so much bringing a whole bunch of new people in from the outside, but giving people who are mostly already here in the community, and sometimes from nearby communities, a better place to live than they currently have. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, that we have people that are living in substandard housing. We have people that are living in very crowded conditions because they can't afford to live elsewhere. So people need to remember that this is a way that the city is not only able to, but is required by law to upgrade its existing housing for its most vulnerable populations, and to give working families, and that's what we're talking about with this particular development. This is not, Skid Row housing. These are working people that are have to go through credit checks and background checks to get this housing, to give them a better place to live. So I think this is a perfect site for it because it does abut commercial. It's in a major transportation corridor. We're not allowed to talk about design, so I won't. We will be hearing the appeal in its right time, but I don't think it's right in general to hold projects up to resolve appeals. It's just too easy for them to be stalled for that. We need to hear that case on its own. So I believe that the parking's been addressed by staff and dealt with. I've visited the other sites. This is not an experiment. We already have 4 of these housing projects in the city. They haven't been a problem. The police has told us it's not a problem in terms of crime. I've walked through their parking lots and seen empty parking lots. These are people that are not owning 2, 3, 4 cars, not on $40,000 a year. And when you go there, and I would ask anybody who's concerned to go and visit those developments, and you'll see that those are pristine parking lots with no oil spots, and because there's not very many cars. So do I have a crystal ball? Can I see 20 years in the future? No. I can only look at what I see now and make my best, use my best judgment, and I trust staff, and I trust that it's adequately parked and that it won't have a negative impact on the businesses around it. I think it's the right spot, the right time, and the right thing to do. So I support this project. Thank you.
Mr. Weaver.
The ADI knows very fully when they built the first project, and I went down into the two-story garage, and it was over half empty. I said something is drastically wrong. As they know, I've talked to staff about making changes to the parking in senior and affordable housing units, and that's been done. Secondly, on Salem between Central and Columbus, there are 22 single-family dwelling units, of which 5 are apartment buildings, 3 two-story and 2 3-story. The nearest other tall structure, I think is 4 stories, is to the northwest over a block away. So it has not been converted to a high-density multi-family 4 or 5-story structure yet. In fact, when we designed the downtown specific plan, the idea of putting the boundary of the redevelopment agency on the west side of Central was to, I think, put the boundary on the back side of the buildings fronting on Central, and then to step it down into the single-family neighborhood with other buildings that came along. At least that's what I recall. Thank you.
Okay.
One last thing.
Go ahead, Ms.
I am greatly concerned that this project was really rushed through the city, put a lot of pressure on staff. Normal time to get on to design review is 2 to 3 months. This made it in a month or so, from what I can tell. I got a chronology history. I worked it all out myself. And it's not fair. If we're going to rush something like this through, then rush every other project through. It's not fair to treat anybody in this city differently from anybody else. That's my own personal opinion and just mine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, let me say, if there was any rush, it was because of the tax credits. So it wasn't an arbitrary decision on the part of the
Tax
staff.
credits, there's 2 more rounds of tax credits.
But far into the future. Okay, we have a motion and a second for the council. Could I have a roll call, please?
Council members Draymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Abstain.
Mayor Quintero.
Yes.
Let's have roll then on all the Housing Authority motions and resolution.
Authority members Draymond,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Mincy,
Yes.
Barazian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver,
Abstain.
Chairman Najarian.
Yes.
Okay, what is next?
Move to adjourn for council?
So moved.
Move to adjourn for the
housing.
Second.
Adjourned.
Thank you. Please turn off your microphone.